Hello, me. So I want to review a book, and this book is Esoteric Empathy by Raven Digitalis. I should say that Raven did contact me and asked me if I wanted a copy of this book for review. However, at that time I had already bought this book for myself. I did promise to review it though, and I really feel bad that it has taken me this long. It sort of feels a bit rude, because I'm really honored that an author would ask me to make a review with my tiny little YouTube channel. But things have just gotten in the way, and yeah. But I am at it now. And basically, this is a very interesting book. And it's one of those books that I really like, because there's a lot of occult books, especially those that goes towards witchcraft, that you have the same beginner books again and again and again. Now, don't get me wrong, I like those beginner books. I very often get them, even if I've been practicing this for quite some time now, just to read them, to get another's perspective. But I really liked also when a book goes deep into one specific topic. And this basically goes with the idea of empathy within magic, and how that can be a tool for magic and esoteric wisdom, and also a path in and of itself. So before I start this review, there is basically two things I should mention about my personal perspective going into the book. And one is that I have Asperger's syndrome. I don't know if Raven knew that when he asked me to review it, just to get that perspective. But I have mentioned it on my video, so if he has seen any of those, which would be awesome, then he might know that. But yeah, and that means that I hate that stereotype with that a lot of people have about people with autism spectrum disorders, that we don't have empathy. We do, but we often, in the form of, we often want people to feel good, we want to help people, and we definitely feel bad when somebody is suffering. But at the same time, it's often not very easy for us to get what others are feeling. Basically, Lisa has stepped on a nail and is sad because her foot hurts. We want to help her. We can offer to help take her to the doctor, but it's hard for us to often feel what she is feeling. Basically, that true sense of empathy. So that's one of the things going into this book. And the other is that while I am not an empath, also, again, because I have Asperger's syndrome, a lot of us have sensitivity issues. And a lot of the problems that faces empaths in our today's society also faces people who are hypersensitive. And in fact, a lot of people who are hypersensitive are also empaths. So yeah, that's just a little bit about what biases and how I go into this book. This basically both discusses empathy within magic as a tool within magic, and also discusses basically a lot about how a spiritual path and magic is, for basically how it is to practice that for somebody who is an empath, and that's quite interesting. So yes, I would also like to say that I really love the design of this book. I think the cover looks very nice. I like these understated designs that are still very interesting. But let's get to it. This isn't directly related to Wicca as such, or specifically to Western occultism, but it definitely have a slant towards that. But it's more about spirituality than one path in particular. So, like with most books, let's begin with the contents, because I think that that's what very often I do when I decide to what book to get. I open it to the content page and have a look there. So we have basically we have a list of figure, dedication, acknowledgements, and opening text thing. We get what that is. When we have chapter 1, understanding empathy. We have empathic anecdotes and emotional revelation, which is a very interesting chapter for me, but at the same time one that I, with my personal issues, had a little bit of a problem getting, but it's well written. And you have describing empathy. About this book, empathy in action, technically speaking, and emotional knowledge. And this basically introduces you to the text, introduces you to the concept of using empathy within your spiritual path. Then you have in practice a checklist to discern your empathic abilities. And I really like that. There are a lot of little checklists and exercises and tools within this book. And I really love it when a spiritual book have those things, because it makes it a lot more interactive than just reading it from page 1 to the end page. And it's often, I'm one of those people that learn best by doing, so I really like that. And you have Vive la Revolution, many peoples, many species, sympathy, concern, hypersensitivity, and other related feelings. I love this chapter. I really, really love this chapter. Like I said, I have hypersensitivity since it's very common with people who have autism, and in my case it's Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of high function autism. And the author describes this having hypersensitivity very well, and some of the difficulties that can be there, and also how it can be a strength. So I really like that. And in practice, a checklist for empathic balance and empathy throughout history. Very interesting. In practice, experiencing and healing residual emotional energy. I love that one. That's a really, really, really good exercise that can really help balance you out. And not just with empathy work, but with if you are hypersensitive and just for people when you're moving through the day. And you have in practice appearance modification, an empathic experiment. Basically how things look differently about after how you feel about it. It's a little bit like this. To me, my mother is one of the most beautiful women in the world. Now, I know when I say my mother is ugly, but she's 65, she's a little bit on the round side, she's a pretty 65-year-old woman, but of course she doesn't, I can rationally say she doesn't look like a movie star, but to me, because I care so much for her, she is the most beautiful woman in the world. And it's basically that when you have an emotion towards something, it changes how you look at it. And I really like that. And in practice, studying empathy in mass communication, also a pretty good one. And you have empathic contemplation, the Asmer phenomenon, which is a really, really interesting topic. And while I don't agree with everything that's in there, it's still an interesting read. Then you have chapter meditation, we have observing empathy at large. Chapter 2, the metaphysics of empathy. There's a lot of small chapters here, so we are going to be at this for a while, people. We have empathic anecdotes, LSD, and empathic spiritual nature. Quite interesting. We have empathy as a spiritual force, empathy in the New Age, and empathy on magical paths. This really introduces you to how this becomes a spiritual thing. How having empathy with something can enable you to be more magically involved with it. Get a better arcane connection to it, if you will. And as such, easier to you to work magic around those things. And you have in practice an uncrossing and cleansing self for empaths. This one is very nice also for people who are not empaths but are hypersensitive. Then you have empathy versus psychism and other traits. That is a really good one because it's basically, if you are psychic and even if you are an empath, it can sometimes be difficult to separate out what is it, where does the line between I have empathy with your situation and your feelings and I am feeling your feelings because of my psychic gift. And this basically helps you sort that out. Where were we? There we were. And we have similar spiritualness, yes. In practice, find your metaphysical elemental alignment. Pretty good one. Receptive and projective empathy, which is a pretty important part, basically. Your ability to feel what others are feeling versus basically projecting your feelings onto someone. Gaining a directive control, projection as manipulation, which is also basically a thing. Basically, it's like this. Let's say I am I'm angry. I am angry that day. It's much easier for me to think that my husband is going to be angry, and by that projecting that onto him and reacting as if he's angry, and that in turn manipulates him and he becomes angry, and can we see where this is going? Yes. Anyway, in practice, exploring empathic energy with a partner. I so want to try to do that with my husband, but I haven't talked him into it yet. He's a little bit skeptical about doing spiritual work with me, because the one time we did, it didn't go so well. He's also an occultist, but on a completely different path. You have empathic contemplation, types of empaths. Chapter meditation, a Yesod path working for empathic wisdom. This one is so good, and it also ties into the Tree of Life. Really love that one. And we have chapter 3, balancing the self. We have empathic anecdote, dangers of muting the ability, and it's basically a lot of people who are empath have this. It gets very tiresome. Now, like I said, I'm not an empath myself, so I can't speak for them, but it still is something that can be very difficult from what I hear. And then it can be easy to want to tone that down, and this basically speaks that might not be a good idea. It's better to get a balance in it. And you have knowing yourself, bring it to mind, stepping back, consider your conditioning, affirmative captain, and express yourself. Basically, it's basically a chapter on balance in this. In practice, mudras for increasing energy. I love mudras, so I have to love that one. Meeting your own needs. Love yourself, baby. Daily releasing and elemental cleansing. Give me a break. Sleep is the brother of health. Hypnotherapy. Musical bliss. Tips for combating anxiety and depression. Actually, all of these exercises, spells, and rituals are quite useful, whatever or not you use the path described in this book, but they are useful. They would be useful in any book. So excuse me, that's my dishwasher making some sounds. These are pretty good. These are pretty good exercises. And then we have in practice empathizing with contrasting stimuli, which is quite interesting. Empathic contemplation, cultivating dietary empathy for your pets. And meditation, spiritual realignment with Adam Kadmon. Then we have chapter 4, grounding, shielding, and energy management. We have an empathic anecdote, fantasy, magic, disillusionment, and discretion. We have grounding, centering, and shielding, which is always useful. Energetic grounding, energetic shielding. In practice, geometric protection shields, forming personal practice, green eggs and ham. Basically, spiritual house cleaning. In practice, ritual grounding and mental realignment, energetic awareness, mind your P's and Q's, prana and ki, apathy, and as a pain response. Again, staying healthy, both spiritual and mentally yourself. That's what that chapter is about. In practice, become an observer. Empathic contemplation, the dangers of personality absorption. Because that is also something that can happen when you are very empathic. You can sort of take on the personality traits of someone and lose yourself in that. And then we have meditation, cord cutting for empathic realignment, which is also a very useful thing to complete something, to be finished with it. Then we have chapter 5, approaching the mundane world. Empathic anecdote, absorption and light work. Defining socially, who's who, social boundaries and constructs. Interpreting other. Consider the individual. In practice, operating empathy, random magical acts. Public interaction and interpersonal balance, invoking confidence, demonstrating social compassion, lines in the sand, windows to the soul, confronting confrontations, vent to help, ground control, modes of communication, and who are your peers. This chapter is so useful for me because it doesn't really just help people who are empathic, it also helps people who are hypersensitive like me. So yeah, I really like that chapter. Then we have in practice, empathic elixir spell for emotional relief. That one I so want to do, I haven't done it yet. Empathic contemplation, empathy to a fault, which is definitely an important one. And chapter meditation, a deep cleansing ritual bath, which I also want to do but haven't done yet. Then we have chapter 6, empathy and magical work. We have empathic anecdote, empathizing and traumatizing painful frequencies. We have tools and techniques for esoteric empaths, empathic symbolism and tools of the trade, which is basically now we come into the using your empathy as a spiritual path, and I really like that. Then we have an amber and yet such a spell to establish energetic boundaries. We have ritualistic empathy, empathic gods and goddesses, magical empathic transmutation. In practice, empathic deity alignment, empathic contemplation, drugs and mind-altering substances, chapter meditation, alchemizing wounds with Baphomet. And then we have chapter 7, empathic healing and social service. We have empathic anecdote, the case of mutual pathfinding, counseling, healing, and divining. Know your intentions, know your limits, know your needs, empathic spiritual services, psychotherapeutic approaches. And we are soon nearing the end there. It seems to have been reading up what's in this book for quite some time. And we have in practice, preparing for healing, divinatory, or therapeutic work. Client interaction, a safety dance, methodological assistance, medical recommendations, and emotional needs. In practice, working with difficult clientele, social service and volunteer work. In practice, magical postcards for change, empathic contemplation, empathic parenting, chapter meditation, a compassion meditation to spread empathy. Then you have in conclusion, closing text, about, opus, anima, obscure, bibliography, and index. So, that's what's in the book. And if that got a bit long and boring to listen to, I'm sorry about that. It's more that, but like I said, when I want to buy a book, I like to know what's in it, especially when it's a non-fiction book, to see if it's something for me. I really like this book. Like I said, it doesn't conform to one particular path. We have some about the goddesses and gods, which is very pagan based, and then we have working a little bit with Baphomet, working a little bit with various forms within the ritual, within modern ceremonial magic, a little bit of pagan magic, a little bit of everything, and Raven Digitalis is very much like that in his works. They are very eclectic, and I like that. I think this is a very interesting work because it basically takes the topic of empathy and how it plays a very important part in magic and spirituality. And it's very easy when you read the title of that book to think, oh well, it's just about being nice to people and all of that, but it isn't really. It's more that how you feel and how you feel in relation to others can drastically affect how you work magic and how you function in your day-to-day life. So I think I would recommend this book. It is pretty good. It's an interesting topic, and if nothing else, there's some really good exercises here. Even if we aren't really interested in using empathy as a part of your spiritual work, there's a lot of interesting exercises there. I also think that for somebody who might not be an occultist, there's a lot of tools here just for coping if you are an empath or are hypersensitive, and that might be worth the price of the book regardless. So yeah, it's a well-written book. And it has so much in it. Some mudras, spells, exercises. It's just so full of information. So I really like it. And yeah, I wish I had gotten around to reviewing it sooner. And that is my review of Esoteric Empathy by Raven Digitalis. And one more word about it. This is like no other occult book I have, and I have several thousand books about the occult. And this one is pretty unique, and you don't often find that. When you're starting to build up a book collection in one particular topic, usually when you get a book, it can be really great, but it still reminds you of something else that you have. And as such, sometimes it can be great to just find something that's just really different. So yeah, this is a well done book and I recommend it. I'll give it 8 out of 10. That is my review of Esoteric Empathy by Raven Digitalis. Have a great day and blessed be.